You remember that nerdy kid, the one in middle school who spent a lot of time on the internet and dressed up in weird costumes? And sure, all that time on the internet and computers netted me a good job, but it wasn't my passion. That passion? Photography. And it turns out that photography was something that was already in my blood. So if you like cameras, film, chemistry, history, adventure, and a little bit of exploration, then I think we're going to get along just fine.
Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux, and people love ranking things. People love seeing things on lists and where everything stacks up. So, inspired by my friend Molly Kate over on Electachrome, you can see her channel in the description below, and also make sure to check out her Substack where she's currently publishing her articles. Put out a tier list of all the films she has ever shot. Now, if I did that, we'd be here for several hours, so I decided to do something similar, but I'm going to be ranking all the black and white films that I've ever shot and putting them on the standard tier list, so let's get into it. Alright, so to clear up a couple things first, as I mentioned earlier, this is strictly towards black and white films that I have shot more than one roll of, or have written a review, or has become a standard film in my toolkit. One thing I am going to bring up is a matter of rebadges. There are several film stocks that I have used in the past and use on the regular that are rebadges. Now, if I know that the rebadge is the exact same as the original is going to appear on the list, but a rebadge is not. In some cases, a rebadge has been modified or is shot at a different film speed, in which case that is going to be included, and I'm meaning this towards Agfa Avifot 80, which is actually on this list 3 times, but because it is shot and modified in different ways, I count those as a separate film stock. Some films I know are rebadges, but don't actually know what the original is. That will be included on the list as well. And one other final note, this is only going to include films that are currently being manufactured, and it doesn't include anything that is potentially expired or has ceased production that I know have ceased production. Alright, so let's get into what our categories are. There is, of course, S tier, which is the top dog. These are the films that I always take with when I need the best possible results. Next are A tier films. These aren't bad films, but they're more like backups if I can't get or don't necessarily have the ability to get my hands on any of the S tier film stocks. And then finally there is the B tier. Again, these aren't bad, but they aren't necessarily ones that I will reach for either first or second. These are great if I am testing out a new camera or a new developer, that I just need something relatively inexpensive that will deliver good quality items. Finally, there is the C tier films. These are films that are hard to handle or hard to get a hold of, or ones that I really haven't gotten the hang of yet. D tiers are the ones that are really hard to handle, and even I have had struggles getting them to work right. These aren't ones that I will grab, but I might grab once in a while if I just want to give it another crack. And then finally there's F tier, and these are the ones that I have shot and I'm never going to touch again. Okay, so first up is Kodak film. Kodak films encompasses both the films that I've shot from Kodak Alaris and from Eastman Kodak. These are hands down some of my favorite film stocks out there, and they're always one that I generally reach for. So let's start. All right, number 1 on the list is Kodak Tri-X400. This is my hands down all-time favorite fast black and white film. It has latitude, forgiveness, and offers up a classic look and feel. And while some people think that the post-2007 version is a lot worse than the original, it's really the only one I have the most experience with. So this goes into the S tier. Alright, so next up is Kodak T-Max 400. This is not always my first choice for fast film, but I cannot deny that T-Max 400 offers up a very modern look and super sharp images no matter how you shoot and develop it. It also is my go-to when doing lens reviews, simply because it gives that modern look. That goes into the A tier. Alright, T-Max 100 is another personal favorite, mostly because of how easy it is to make it change and look different depending on the exposure index, developing, and filtering, and the conditions out there. It goes in the S tier. Alright, T-Max P3200. This one isn't bad, but I'm not one for fast films. I'm more likely to underexpose and push T-Max 400 or Tri-X. And while P3200 does look good at slow speeds, this isn't a slow film, and I really haven't figured out my favorite way of using it. So P3200, you go into the C tier. Alright, the classic cinema film Eastman XX5222. This is the film that Tri-X unthroned as Kodak's fast film back in the mid-20th century. It's still available today from a number of people in its 35mm format, or you can get it as from Cinestill in 120 format. It is by far my favorite mid-speed film with a lot of latitude. It goes in the S tier. Alright, of all the manufacturers that I'm going to talk about today, Ilford Photo probably has the most number of black and white films that I'm going to go through. It is, again, another favorite of mine, and while definitely doesn't hold as big a place in my heart as Kodak does, they still produce some really good films. So let's bring up that tier list again and start adding in the Ilford. Alright, first up is HP5. It took me a long time to get to like HP5. And I don't know why, but probably because I wanted something closer to Tri-X, and HP5 is definitely not Tri-X. But that doesn't make it a bad film. It is an excellent film and it has its place. But honestly, I will grab HP5 if I can't get my hands on Tri-X. So HP5 is A tier. Alright, FP4. I love FP4. It is hands down my favorite mid-speed film and fills in a neat little gap that Kodak left when Plus X went goodbye. Great for summers, travels, and of course portraits. So it goes in the S tier. Ilford Delta 100. This is another solid option, but I find it a bit too punchy and lacks that certain look that T-Max 100 is. But if I can't get T-Max, I'll get Delta 100. So it goes into the A tier. Delta 400. Like HP5, it took me a bit to come to like Delta 400, but unfortunately, it offers up a vanilla modern look. It doesn't have as much contrast, and it certainly isn't as sharp as T-Max 400. So Delta 400, sorry, you're B tier. Alright, Delta 3200. Again, fast films aren't my go-to, but I like Delta 3200 better than P3200, mostly because you can get it in 120 still. And I find it has a slightly nicer grain structure and nicer contrast than the T-Max variant. So again, not a fan of fast films, so this goes into B tier. Alright, Ilford SFX200. This is Ilford's near infrared offering, and it was again a tough nut to crack, but that's okay because it isn't a bad film if you want to go and shoot it behind some filters. Grab a red or a deep red or even a full-on infrared filter, then you get a fine-grained developer like Mic X, Microfin, or Xtol, and it actually gives really good results, especially in the summer. So it's not always a first or a second choice for me, but it is definitely a strong B tier film. Pan F Plus, and I will admit I love working with slow films, and Pan F offers up an accessible slow film with great panchromatic response and latitude. And while it might not be easy to manage that contrast, you can adjust it with overexposing and pulling the film, and then do the pull-in development. So Pan F definitely is a strong S tier film for me. All right, the new kid on the block for Ilford is Ortho Plus, and well, it was available in 4x5 for the longest time. A few years back, it came out in roll film format, and with no red sensitivity, it might not be the first choice, but I really enjoy working with this film behind a green filter in the winter. It's slow, but not too slow, and with the right development, you can definitely squeeze a bit more speed out of this 80 speed film. But when it comes to ortho film, it is top dog for me, so it goes in the S tier. Okay, Kentmere 100 for a budget film. This is a great choice for a knockabout film. And well, I will always pick FP4 over Kentmere 100. It's no slouch. Classic grain, good sharpness, and contrast. So it goes in the A tier. And then its faster cousin, Kentmere 400. It took me a bit to figure out where to put this particular film, but the key to getting the best results out of it is adding that yellow filter. It also takes really good underexposure and push processing well. If I can't get Tri-X or HP5, Kentmere 400 is the one that I will go for, and it is definitely a best choice when testing out a new camera or developer. So it goes in the B tier. Okay, last one from Ilford is Super XP2, and while this certainly isn't a traditional black and white film, it is black and white, so it goes on the list. It's not a bad film. It was the film that made me start to like black and white as a format and as a medium, but because it is a C41 film, it's one that I don't really use that often because I don't shoot a lot of C41. Getting it developed is difficult for me, and I honestly have outgrown it. So it's really goes in the D tier for me, only because it's not one I use anymore. Okay, so next on the list is probably one of the best known budget film brands out there, and that's our good friends over at Foma. Now, I've really started to get into Foma in the past couple of years, and I haven't shot a lot of it yet in 2025, but I certainly hope to pick up a few rolls later in the year to start, getting to know it again. They actually have a decent range of films, and I've shot most of them. The only one that's not going to appear on the list is Foma 100R, their black and white reversal, only because I haven't shot it yet. All right, let's bring up that tier list and fill in the Fomas. All right, kicking it off with Foma Pan 100. This is another classic 100 speed film and my favorite of all the Foma Pan line. It's excellent sharpness, grain structure, it's easy to work with and develop, and I really have no complaints, so it goes into the A tier. Next up is Foma Pan 200. This is the only modern grain option and took me a bit of work to like and develop. It works great in 510 Pyro and FX39.2, and with a bit of overexposures, works wonders. It's perhaps my favorite 200 speed film, and for me, that's saying a lot. It goes in the B tier. Foma Pan 400. If you liked pre-2007 Tri-X, this one is definitely for you. It offers up a classic fast film, and while some say it isn't a true 400 speed film, you can get that box speed with the right development. It isn't a bad one, but I don't use it unless I want that classic look. It definitely goes in the B tier. Foma Ortho 400. This is another new kid on the block, and I'm still trying to get the hang of this film. The one thing I'm sure of is don't use it behind a green filter, and you definitely want to develop it in a strong, fast developer to get the best results. So it's not one I'm particularly liking yet, so it goes into the C tier. All right, and finally we have Retro Pan 320. I honestly don't see why Foma released this one. It isn't a bad film, but it has far more visible grain than even 400, and it looks good in only one or two developers. And despite having that visible grain, it is really muddy, it is really soft, and it is a film that if I don't touch it again in the rest of my life, I'm happy. So it's F tier. All right, next up is Film Ferrania. These are our friends from Italy, and I'm so glad to hear the good news that the company is now under new ownership and they're going to start producing film. And hopefully in a couple months from you seeing this video, we're going to see fresh Ferrania products on the shelves. All right, time to add those to the tier list, so let's bring it up. Okay, so first is the original option from Ferrania, and that is P30. This is a high contrast orthochromatic film that rates the speed of ASA 80. It really only delivers good results in a couple of developers and under really, really good bright but even lighting conditions. It's not really that accessible as a film, and I struggle with it. Plus, I think it's been discontinued, but don't quote me on that one. So P30, sorry, you go strongly into the D tier. Ferrania's second option, Orto, might be slower than P30, but it is a much nicer film to work with in many different conditions than developers. I'm glad they released this one, and I do like it, but available is not the best as of the recording, so it goes into the B tier. All right, the latest release from Ferrania is P33, and even after only using 3 rolls of this stuff, I am liking the classic results. It is also the easiest to handle of all Ferrania's products. The only downside is production is slow, and new stock hasn't hit shelves left as of recording, but despite that, I'm going to still stick it into A tier. Alright, so next on the list is Rollei films. Now, in all fairness, Rollei branding is actually from a company called Mako Direct, and it is almost entirely made up of rebadged films, some of which I know what they are, and other of them I don't. This is also the ones where you're going to find a couple of single film stocks that are shot in different ways, so I've added them as individual entries. Let's bring up the tier list and add in the Rollei films. First up, Rollei RPX25. This is a great film for the summer when you want something with slow speeds and an extended red sensitivity. It has a unique look and feel both with and without a filter. Plus, you can get it in 35, 120, and sheet formats. It's also the slowest modern film you can get, so this goes into S tier. Next up is Rollei RPX 100. This is a great backup 100 speed film. It looks and feels a lot like Kentmere 100. It's nice, gives nice results, easy to handle with a classic grain structure, excellent sharpness and contrast. So it goes into A tier. Finally, RPX 400. This is another great 400 speed option. Looks stunning in Rollei Super Grain. Lots of good contrast, excellent sharpness, responds well to a yellow filter, and yeah, again, another great backup 400 speed film, but it definitely goes in B tier. Okay, Rollei Retro ADS. If you love contrast, then you're going to love this slow film. Again, you have to be careful about when you shoot it and how you shoot it, and also the format you're in. I've found that it does suffer a bit with quality issues and doesn't have a lot of latitude, especially when shot in high contrast light. It works well with microfilm, surprisingly. It's given me the best results. So it's going to go into C tier. All right, Retro 400S. I don't know what to do with this film. It's inconsistent in the results I get, and some days I like it, but most days I don't. I could probably count on one hand the number of rolls I've been happy with. F tier. Rollei Superpan 200. I wasn't sure about this one at first, but with a bit of practice, I started to get the hang of the stuff. This is a film that you have to develop the right way and maybe add a bit of filtration. So it's going to go in C tier. And finally, we have Rollei Infrared, which is great because this is hard to place because it's good at only one thing, infrared photography. So you're going to need to have a lot of sun. You're going to need that R72 IR filter. But if you get those things right, the results are magical. But it's a one-trick pony. So C tier. Okay, so probably the film manufacturer with the least number of film stocks that gets its own segment is Adox Photo out in Germany. This is the modern version of a classic German film manufacturer. And while they do produce some rebadge films, they also have a single native film stock that is one they produce themselves and finished with the help of Ilford Imaging. This is the Swiss branch of the company. And yeah, let's bring it up and add in the pair. First and foremost is CHS 102. If you like classic look and feel with all the conveniences of a modern film emulsion, then CHS 102 is for you. This is a rebirth of the classic F-Key 100 speed film, which itself is the continuation of one of the original German Wonder films from the original Adox. Unfortunately, it is hard to get, and it's not always something that people look for. You really want to give it a bit of overexposure to like ASA 80, but it does love being developed in Adox FX39-2. And while I normally would put this higher, due to supply issues, it has to unfortunately go into B tier. Okay, so next up is Adox HR50 or Scala 50. And I really don't know what Adox does to the film, but it gives a delightful sharpness, especially when paired with their HR Dev or FX39-2. Plus, it pulls double duty as a black and white slide film when processed in their Reversal Scala developer kit. But again, there's a lot of supply issues with this one, and you really can only get it in 35mm, so it's going to go into B tier. Alright, so we're continuing to stay in Europe, and this time we're going to Ukraine, and I'm going to be discussing the films that comes from Astrum. These are the folks that continue the work from the original Shoshka Svema factory and have basically taken over production of all of these. Unfortunately, due to the continued illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces, getting these films are difficult, but I still wanted to include them also. So let's bring up the tier list and let's keep going. Starting off with my favorite, and that would be FN64. I'm a sucker for slow films, and this is certainly a good film to fit in with a classic film speed, ASA 64. I've loved the results I've gotten so far from the stock in the past, but again, trouble getting it in my hands, and the slow speed. Unfortunately, FN64, while I would rate you higher, you go in C tier. Next up, Photo 100 is the most accessible of all these films. This is a classic mid-speed film, lots of character, easy to develop, and responds well to almost all developers and gives good image quality, but again, sourcing it is hard. C tier. Photo 200. When it comes to these films, Photo 200 is a favorite to many, but not to me. And it's not that it's a bad film, it's just I feel it tries too hard sometimes. There's a lot more grain than what I would expect. It loves the yellow filter, which gives it a beautiful contrast, but the big problem, as someone who develops my own black and white film, the base is razor thin. It's hard to load onto plastic reels, so it goes in D tier. Photo 400. This one is a big old nope. I don't know if it was my developing just the film or the conditions I was shooting it in. There was just golf ball sized grain no matter how I developed it, and everything just looked low contrast and muddy. F tier for Photo 400. And last but certainly not least is NK2. Like Photo 100, there's nothing wrong with NK2. It is a slightly different film stock. There's a bit more contrast, decent grain, but you don't really want to shoot it at full box speed. You might want to get it to like ASA 80 or ASA 64 and then develop normally. So yeah, it ends up in the same spot as Photo 100, C tier. All right, let's keep going with Orwo, or Original Wolfen. This is the version of Agfa that survived and still keeps going on today. And while again, there are some questions about the current owner, there's no doubt that Orwo is still putting out film, although sourcing it can be a little bit difficult. So let's bring up the list and add in Orwo. All right, starting it off with UN54 Plus, probably the best of the best from Orwo. This is a fine-grain, rich contrast motion picture film with good versatility and also pretty darn sharp. It does look best in D96, but works well in other developers. That being said, it might have a bit of a narrow latitude, so maybe a third stop in either direction. It is a little hard to come by, so it goes into B tier. All right, next, NP100. This is the variant of UN54 for still photography. So Orwo has added an anti-halation layer to it, so it has all the good and some of the bad of 54 plus. It is a touch sharper than its motion picture film, but again, works well in any developer, although my personal favorite is 510 Pyro, also B tier. N74 Plus, this is a coarse grain, hard to handle, fast motion picture stock, and I have a feeling that something changed between the first time I used it to the current batch. I really only like it in D96 and under good bright conditions, so it goes in F tier. P400, like NP100, P400 is a still photography variant of N74, and like N74, I can't stand this film. Again, good in D96, but lacking any sort of punch to make it worthwhile. Heavy, muddy, visible grain, and low contrast, but not in a good way. F tier. DN21 is a slow copy film. It's rated around ASA 12. It's the negative part of the duplicating process, and it delivers amazing results for being a slow film. Excellent middle contrast, fine grain, amazing sharpness, and for a copy film, it has pretty good latitude. The only trouble is that it has a limited number of developer combos, so it goes in the C tier. DP31 is the positive side of the duplicating process, and being a positive film by nature, it has a lot of contrast and it's a slow film rating around ASA 8. Makes it hard to handle and definitely gives an interesting look. Good fine grain, excellent sharpness, but not a favorite, but I wouldn't say no to using it either, so it goes into D tier. Alright, so last but certainly not least on the list is the film photography project. Like Mako Direct, the FPP does spool a lot of rebadge films, and they have contracts with various different companies, but they have also are a sole provider of a couple very unique films that I wanted to bring to light within this tier list. So let's bring up the list and get a look at the couple of FPP films that I've come to love. So first up is FPP X-ray film. Now this specifically is the 35mm version of their X-ray film. It is a green sensitive film and was designed for medical X-ray purposes. And of all the X-ray films that I've shot, this is the one is the most unique. It definitely gives a delightful look for foliage, and it just does an absolutely fantastic job. I really like the results I got from it. It's a fairly fast film for being an X-ray film, but yeah, no, it is a strong B tier film. All right, so next up is FPP's black and white infrared film. This is probably the only true infrared film you can get your hands on. Now there is Rollei infrared, but it is just an extended red sensitivity film. This one you can throw it behind a true IR filter and get absolutely amazing results. Heck, you can get amazing results out of just it behind an 89B filter. It delivers really great results behind even the deep red. You get black skies, bright white foliage, and bright white clouds, but again, little difficult to shoot for the average person, so again, it goes into B tier. Okay, so you've stuck to me to the very last group of films. This is the rest. These are boutique brands. Oftentimes they're re-rolls that I don't know what the original source is or cannot confirm what it is, or companies that only really have a single black and white film stock out there. So let's bring up that tier list one last time and add in the rest. Alright, so first on the list is Japan Camera Hunters Street Pan 400. This started off as a unique dead stock film when it was first released, but it has definitely changed since then, and I know it is a re-spool, but I just don't know which one. It is hard to handle, needs exacting conditions, and I definitely think it is not a 400 speed film. There's a lot of contrast, a lot of punch, and yeah, I've liked it in the past, but it's just gotten too hard for me to worry about, and I have other films I like. So, sorry Street Pan, you're F tier. Okay, next up is Fujifilm Neopan Acros 102. Well, many say this is a re-spool. It honestly is an exact match of the original Acros 100. It is I am sure it is manufactured domestically, but is simply finished outside of Japan because there are markings on the box that say finished in the UK. This is a smooth contrast film. It's excellent for portraits, architecture, or if you really need to get long exposure shots because you don't have to start adjusting for reciprocity failure after a 20-minute exposure. Although it's not always my first choice due to availability, it is definitely one that if I need portraits of a certain look and feel and want to give the best results to my subject matter, it is the one I pick, so it goes into A tier. All right, Street Candy ATM 400. This is a former ATM surveillance film, and one that I had such a hard time working with it. It might have been the conditions or the developers, but I liked only one roll. Sorry, I'm just not touching this one again. F tier. Agfa Copex Rapide. This is a high contrast copy film that needs a special developer to work. Sure, I got it to work in other developers fine, but it's not the easiest to work with. Plus, it's hard to get your hands on the film and impossible in North America to get your hands on the developer. F tier. Berger Pancro 400. This one's out of France, and it's the only company from the film that focuses mainly on paper. It's not bad, but it's just a little too grainy, and I can get better 400 speed options. Plus, I haven't seen it on store shelves, both in person or online, in years. So, sorry, F tier. All right, and finally, Cat Labs Xfilm 320 Pro. This is the second version of Xfilm 320. The professional one, this new one is, I know it's a rebadge, I'm just not sure what the original stock is, but it doesn't really matter. This is a stunning film that offers that fine grain, excellent edge sharpness, and delightful contrast, especially when paired with 510 Pyro. While I would like to know more, I think it might kill the magic. Yep, Xfilm 320 Pro, A tier. All right, folks, so that covers it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this little tier video. It probably was the easiest one for me to produce in a relatively short time frame. I might do one for expired film or discontinued film that I've shot in the past and are generally no longer available. I think that would be really fun for me to do and, again, be relatively easy. Don't count on me doing a color one. I don't shoot a lot of color, and I really am not that big of a fan of color film. So I definitely would not have a very unbiased or personal preference list for that one. But I highly recommend you check out Molly's tier list. Again, you can find that on her channel. The link is in the description below. And let me know in the comments, was there a film stock that I missed that you'd like to see me give a try to? Or do you think that I was completely wrong in any of my ratings? Because one of the best parts about film photography is that there is something out there for everyone, and everyone has amazing opinions that may not always agree with mine, or you might think that I was completely on the mark. Also, if you have any questions for me, all through 2025, I will be collecting questions and giving you answers about my life, my photography, and more. Leave that in the comments using the hashtag AskALP, and I'll be putting together the answers video in December 2025. So you still have a long way to get those questions in, and I would love to be able to answer them to you. So until next time, my friends, get out there, shoot what you love, with what you love, on what you love. Don't give in to the hype.